Now I am all too aware that I am late to the party when it comes to this toy line, but I also know that the same can be said for many of you, and believe me when I tell you, you need to know about these toys. So, I am of the age where most of my childhood toys were given to me with little to no explanation as to what they actually were. After all, this was the time of Kenner Toys, and their licensing of such properties as Robocop, Terminator, Alien and Predator, all of which were movies that weren't really suitable for a kid of my age. In fact, I think the first toy line like this for me was actually Transformers, where I knew nothing of the show but fell in love with the toys instantly just for what they were. Another toy line much the same for me was actually Masters of the Universe. Now granted, this was for a much shorter period of time, as I did quickly find the animated series soon after my introduction, but for a while at least, all I had was these toys. And it's funny how quickly we've actually forgotten this lost ability to make up our own stories with our toys. After all, nowadays, everything has a backstory. Everything is sold with a purpose. But back then, back in my childhood days, I just used to simply tip out the toy box on the floor and create my own stories for the characters I knew nothing else about, outside of their appearance in action figure form. It was a special time. But I digress. So for those of you who know me, who have been watching the channel for a while now, you'll know that my collecting habits can be quite impulsive. In fact, I often refer to my collecting as seasonal, meaning that I like to change focus from time to time with different things. And usually if I like something, I go all in, jumping head first straight into the deep end. And this has happened to me recently. In fact, I'm still recklessly spending as we speak, albeit to my wife's judgment. So, what new product has caught my interest? Well, if the thumbnail of this video is anything to go by and it's not just clickbait, then you will all know that it's Mythic Legions. For those of you who are unaware of what Mythic Legions are, let me explain. Mythic Legions is a series of action figures created by a team known as the Four Horsemen, and if you are remotely interested in toys, you have likely encountered their work before. The Four Horsemen first met whilst working on McFarlane Toys and decided to go it alone and create their own brand and company. And this is actually quite ironic when you consider the history of McFarlane and his move from Marvel to form Image Comics back in the 1990s. Anyway, this highly skilled team set out to make their own action figure line, avoiding known franchises that they had previously worked upon, and making new characters from scratch. And boy, are these figures amazing. Mythic Legions as a brand and concept take their basis from the world of fantasy, most likely because the creatures found within that world are actually public domain, although I can't be sure that's the actual reason. Anyway, regardless of reason, this brand will go on to make beautifully sculpted 1/12 scale action figures. Now I say 1/12 scale, as yes, this is true, but don't be fooled into thinking that this is the standard size for this line. Not all of these figures are 6 inches. In this case, being 1/12 scale actually means that some of these figures, the trolls for example, are huge monstrous beasts, while others, like the goblins or animal hybrids, are rather small. But regardless of size, every Legion's character is wonderfully executed, with plenty of fine detail and accessories, and better yet, all the parts are modular, meaning you can actually pop and swap amongst your collection to create your own new and exciting characters. So Mythic Legions as a brand has existed for the better part of 10 years now, and though I have always kind of known about them, I haven't really given them much of a look until now. I mean, sure, I've had some of these figures in my collection over the years, but it is only now in 2024 that I have truly found myself hooked on this brand. Now, there is no doubt that many of you out there are hearing me talk about this line and are wondering about the cost. And I mean, we've all heard the stories, right? This line is super expensive. And for the most part, it can be, but only if you collect in reverse. This is not a line where you want to be a completionist. I mean, sure, you can go backwards and attempt to buy the older figures, but you will no doubt find yourself spending a small fortune. However, if like me you steer clear of all that and simply set your sights on the present and future, you should be okay. And by all means, please understand, that's not me saying don't go backwards. After all, I too have actually picked up some older figures that I really liked and wanted for my collection, but I'm just not looking to be a completionist here with this line. I don't think it's even possible. So that brings us to the question of how we actually get these. Where do we buy these toys from? And from what I can gather, there are 3 options. Option 1. You order direct from the Four Horsemen Studios themselves. And this is without doubt the cheapest way to purchase these figures. Now granted, my being in the UK means that for every figure that I do buy, I have to pay a little bit more for both the purchase and the shipping. However, with the starting price of just £29 for a baseline figure, this is more than reasonable in my eyes. I mean, even if I was to include the shipping from the US to the UK, this still works out as a similar price to that of a NECA or Super 7 action figure. So therefore, to me, it's a no-brainer. Now, to be fair, there are cons to this. Con number 1, you must pay up front. Con number 2, you have to wait for this figure to be made, which can take anything up to a year. And con number 3, once that order window closes, they are gone. So you have to act rather sharpish if you even remotely want that figure. But this brings us on to buying option number 2, retail. Some of these figures can be found in various stores and can be pre-ordered much in the same way as option 1. However, there are both pros and cons to this too. A pro, for example, is that you can order now and pay later, depending on the retailer of course, while a con is that you will be paying a premium price having missed the window from the store horsemen themselves. And finally, buying option number 3, the one to avoid unless absolutely necessary. That is of course the second-hand market. This is what most people see and mean when they say that Mythic Legions are too pricey. They are more often than not referring to older, more rarer figures that have now seen an increase in demand as new collectors enter the Legions community. And speaking of community, there are some fantastic Facebook groups regarding this line, with many people whom are willing to help newbies navigate and find what they are looking for. Honestly, I cannot recommend this toy line enough, and I am genuinely in awe of all it has to offer and cannot wait to see what else is still to come. Looking back at the older waves, it is clear to see that this line is getting stronger with each new release, and from what I have heard from various members of the community, the prices have barely changed in over 10 years of service. And now, having a few in hand, I can honestly tell you guys that this is the most fun I've had with a toy line for a very, very long time. Honestly guys, I mean it. This is just like being a kid all over again. This is a flashback to the older, more rare time, back when I was young, back when I didn't necessarily know the history and mythology behind a character, and just had fun with my toy box. Now yes, to be fair, Mythic Legions does indeed have a mythology tying everything together, but I'm pretty much ignoring all that at this time, and just enjoying the figures for what they are. And this is even to the point where I'm creating my own names and backstories to many of these characters. So, who do I have? What figures have I gone for as a starting point to this collection? Well, like I said in the beginning of this video, I already had 3 of these figures in my collection before, and these were Kawaras, Purpler, and Kronor, all 3 of which you can see are Masters of the Universe inspired. And so, kind of sticking with the He-Man theme, the next 2 figures that I have on pre-order are Atlas 2.0 and Bodva, both of which very much fit into the Barbarian category. I then purchased both Thrace and Swig, which fill out the mystical side, Duban, Borea, and an Ogre to fill out the muscle, and then I placed an order for the Monkey King, because, well, of course I did. But it didn't stop there. Whoa, no. Once I had some of these figures in hand, I just had to have more. And because of this, for the last few weeks, I've been selling multiple items from my collection in order to fund this new one. I purchased the Genie and Warrior Dragon because, well, to put it frankly, they look freaking awesome. 2 Trolls that I found cheap on eBay due to them having minor paint damage. Poxus the Evil Woodland Fairy, a Goatman, the Ghost of Jacob Marley, the Headless Horseman, and finally 2 skeletons. One in medieval garments, which is more fitting with the others that I have ordered, and the other in a more standalone sci-fi theme. A figure from the offshoot Cosmic Legions, which really reminds me of those classic EC comics from the 1950s. Oh, and if that wasn't enough, I've also pre-ordered some Templar Knights, each of which have swap out faceplates which turn them into skeletons. And I can't wait to get these figures in hand, dirty them up and make them look old and worn. So yeah, my new obsession, Mythic Legions. Honestly guys, if you've never had one of these figures before, do yourself a favour, go out and purchase one. However, heed my warning, once you have one, you're gonna get addicted. Thanks for watching.